So what do you want out of this life? That's a question many of us ask on a pretty regular basis. Is it wealth, your job, your marriage, your health, your friends, your car, your vacation, your retirement, your college degree, maybe a master's? Maybe you want master's tickets. See what I did there? Rest, children. Notice I said rest before children. Grandchildren, food, snacks. Remember, I didn't say food and snacks in the same vein. Snacks are totally different than food. Food is what you eat because it's good for you and it fuels you. Snacks are not good for you. If I ask for a snack and you hand me celery, I will slap that stuff out of your face and say, don't ever put that in front of me and call it a snack again. And just to let you all know, Halloween's coming up, and I know some people say you're not supposed to talk about Halloween in church, but here's the thing. There's a very important part of Halloween to me, and that's candy. And so when I come to your house and I knock on the door, do not say, I'm giving you this freeze-dried fruit that's full of vitamins and minerals. I want a Reese's peanut butter cup that's packed with peanut butter, okay? So if you're going to do good, healthy stuff for Halloween, just keep your lights turned off and don't let anybody come to your house. Food and snacks are not the same. Power, fame, promotions, wisdom, knowledge, safety, revenge, fairness, equality, peace, justice, right, a fight, a war, tomorrow. What is it that you're looking for? You see, not everything on this list is good. Some things are not good. Some things are not good for us. But yet sometimes they tend to be the things that we seek out in this life. Good, everything that's good has a connection to God. And there's no way to get around it. Everything in this life that's good, everything that's good for us, everything that's good about us has a connection to God. Luke chapter 18, verse 19 says, no one is good except God alone. See, the things that we seek in life, if we want to be good, if we want to do good, if we want it to have good results, the only way we could do that is if God is a part of it. James chapter 1, verses 16 and 17 says, do not be deceived, my dear brothers. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father, the heavenly lights, who does not change like the shifting shadows. And then, of course, there's the passage of Scripture that Bill read for us earlier today from 2 Thessalonians chapter 1. And I had him read that to you from the Message version because I like the way that it presents that message. But I want us to focus for a moment on verse 11 that says that he may fill every good purpose of yours. That he may fill every good purpose of yours. You see, it's not just about what you want, it's about doing what's right and doing what's good. If we want to operate in God's will, which is what we've been talking about for several weeks now, as we've gone through 1 Thessalonians and now as we begin in 2 Thessalonians, to find the good will of God, if we want to operate in God's will, we need to desire what is good. That needs to be a desire in our heart to seek out and to know the things that are good and to live them out in our lives, to desire what is good. Well, what is good then? What is good? What is our purpose to be? What should we desire? What are these good things that we should desire? Well, I want us to look at that this morning. The first thing is that we have to be willing to dig deep into what what he says here in this passage of Scripture. And it starts there in verse 3. The first thing that we desire and how the good that we desire should be a faith that grows. A faith, not just a faith, but a faith that grows. It needs to grow and develop and be better. Not just growth. Look what he says there. He says there in verse 3 in the Message that it needs to be a phenomenal growth. Peterson says that and puts that in his version in the Message, that he takes that directly from the Greek word that says that talks about growth is a phenomenal growth. It's a growth beyond what you expect. And if we want something to grow, we've got to think about what we have to do in order to make it grow. We have to plan it and set it in its place. It has to have the proper place in our lives. Our faith has to have the proper place in our lives if we want it to grow, if we want it to develop, if we want it to be better. And then we have to nourish it. Give it what is necessary for it to grow. Krista does a little lesson almost every year in her class, and we've done it here at the church, and I'm sure maybe some of you have done it with your own kids at home, where you just take a few simple seeds, just some grass seed, and you put it in a styrofoam cup with some soil, and you put some water on it, and very quickly these little green sprouts start coming up all in the cup, and next thing you know, you have this cup of grass. I don't really know what you're supposed to do with that, but you have this cup of grass that you can look at, and it's amazing, and it helps kids to understand what it takes to make something grow. Sometimes I think as adults that maybe we need to take a little styrofoam cup, get some dirt and put some grass seed in it and pour some water in it and watch it grow and see that in order for it to grow, you have to do some things. You can't just look at a seed and say, hey, I need some vegetables. You have to plant it, you have to water it, you have to take care of it, you have to nurture it in order for it to grow. And sometimes we just we say we have this faith, and we just expect it to do what it's supposed to do on its own. We just expect it to grow and expand in us without us doing anything to it. We don't spend time in prayer. We don't spend time in the Word. We don't come to church. We don't do anything that will help us to grow. And yet we still expect the growth to take place. If you want it to grow, you have to be willing to nourish it. And then comes the not so fun part with the faith that grows. And that's, in order for anything to continue to grow and to do it right, you have to prune it. You have to realize the parts that are not good, that are inhibiting the growth and the development, and you have to cut those things out. You have to be challenged sometimes in your faith. The pruning of your faith sometimes is when you are met with some kind of challenge that you have to realize the realness of your faith, and to understand that it's not just always going to be smooth sailing in this life with Christ, that sometimes we have to be willing to be challenged. And here's the thing, a faith that grows equals a person that grows. And a faith that grows and people that grow equal a church that grows. See, here's the thing, you can go to Barnes & Noble, or you can get on Amazon.com, or you can, go to any other CBD or any of these other websites that sell all these resources, and you can look and you can study church growth all you want to. Listen, nobody in this room has probably read more books on church growth than I have. And here's the thing, you can go, and I've I'll loan you my books if you want to. You can borrow all the books. You can read them all. Some of you have read some of them yourself. You can read all that stuff. You can know it. You can want it. You can all these things. But until you put it into practice, until you truly have a faith that grows, nothing's going to happen. So if we want to develop and understand what God's will is, we need to have a faith that grows. The next thing we need to have is a love that increases. As our faith grows, our love has to increase. It has to develop. Love isn't love if it's stagnant. It's not really love if you don't really pay attention to it or do anything with it or spend any time around it. And it starts at home. You know, it's amazing to me, knowing as many educators as I know and watching my wife go through her teaching career and all these things, that at the people that just send their kids to school expecting them to learn everything about life. In case you didn't know, that's not what school's for. School is to learn how to read and write and do math and those sorts of things. The things that they need to understand and know about life, that's what you need to be teaching them at home. That's what they need to be learning. And that's one of the reasons we're struggling so much as a society, is because it's not happening anymore. In a large majority of the homes in America, it's just not happening anymore. And we can say, well, it's because we're a godless society, but no, it doesn't happen in Christian homes either. And we need to understand that we have a responsibility, and we have to understand that until it begins at home, we can't expect it to be taking place in other places. We have to understand that we have a tremendous responsibility to teach our children and to help them to know and to understand what that is. And it's not even about just telling them, but it's about showing them. I'm glad Krista's not in here this morning, because this would give her a lot of satisfaction, and I don't really want her to have that with this, so please don't tell her I said this. But yesterday we were at Sydney's soccer game, and we don't really know what's happened this year, because the last couple seasons she's played soccer, she's loved it, she's been tremendously aggressive and playing very well, and we know, part of it is she's kind of moved up a league and the field's bigger and there's more kids out there at once. And it's maybe a little bit intimidating, but it's far enough in the season that she should be acclimated more, at least in my opinion. And so we were kind of talking about that yesterday, and I was just like, Sydney, you have to do this and you have to do that. And I looked at Krista and I said, I'm going to have another talk with her about how to play soccer, or how to at least be aggressive and all that sort of thing. And she goes, yeah, that's done you a lot of good so far, hasn't it? And I was steaming, because I was like, And she said, it's not going to do any good until you show her. And so it's really not going to help until I get out in the front yard with her and get the soccer ball out and kick it at her as hard as I possibly can. Oh, wait a minute, that's not the way to do it. Okay, I'll work on that. But until I'm willing to spend the time, and with a 7-year-old, I can tell her. By the way, today's her birthday. She's 7 today. That's pretty awesome. But anyway, I can stand there and tell her all I want to tell her. In fact, I should have known that this was coming, because on the way to the game yesterday, I told her, I said, Sydney, today, and her team name is the Buttercups, which really doesn't instill fear in the hearts of the enemy. But anyway, I said, Sydney, today, the Buttercups are going to dominate. And she looked at me and said, "What does that mean?" You see, we can tell people we love them all we want to, but until we begin to show them, until we begin to model it, it doesn't mean a whole lot. And that starts at home. And then it matures in the community. As we go out of our homes and into our community, you've got to be around other people in order to love other people. You can't say, "Oh, I love my community. I want to help my community. I want to do things for my community," and then sit in your house all the time. You can't say you love your community and you want to serve your community and just sit in a church every Sunday. You can't say you love people and you care about what happens to people if you're never around people. You just can't. "Well, Brad, you don't know. That's not my personality." Listen, I know I've told some of you before, and many of you don't believe me, but at my heart, I am the biggest introvert there is in the world. And especially the older I get, the worse I see it getting. Because I'll tell you what, I'm at the point in my life where if at 8 o'clock in the evening I'm not at home, sitting in my drawers watching NCIS, I'm not a happy camper. Chris will go, "You want to go do this?" Not really. "You want to go do that?" Not really. But it's hard for me to say that I love people if I don't want to be around them. And it's a fight that I have to have with myself sometimes. And I have to realize if I'm going to say it, I've got to do it and I've got to show it. And what's amazing about that is it gets stronger when you do put it to the test. When I say, "You know what, I'm going to make myself get up and go and do this," even if it's something that I'm not really excited about doing, even if I'd rather just be sitting at home watching TV or doing whatever else I'm doing that really is not constructive to anything in my life. If I will say, "I've got to get out and I've got to do this," then I don't regret it, because it puts the reality of what I'm saying to the test. I've never regretted doing something that God wanted me to do, even if it hurts. And the love that increases will get stronger when you put it to the test. Now, the next thing we got to do is we got to have a plan to stick it out. We've got to have a plan that no matter what happens, we are sticking with it. We're not going to back down. We're going to be consistent. We're going to do whatever it is that we're supposed to do. It means, when he talks about this in verse 4, it means to become steady and determined. Are you steady and determined? It is a decision. It is a decision that you make to do what God wants you to do. It is a decision to stick with it no matter what happens. We've made it real easy in this world to quit. Just quit. If you don't like it, just quit. Just walk away. Talking about Sydney and soccer. I noticed in the first couple of games, she wasn't really as into it as she was. And in my heart, I was thinking, maybe I should just tell her she doesn't have to do this. But then I said, you know what? No, she's playing the whole season. She's going to, because she needs to understand that when you make a commitment and when you make a decision, that you need to stick with it. Now, if she don't want to play next season, I'll keep my $75, whatever it was. I don't even know. Krista pays for that stuff and doesn't tell me, because I'll get mad if I know how much it is. But I'll pay whatever I have to pay and send her. And if she doesn't want to do it, I'm going to save that money and we'll find something else for her to do. But the fact of the matter is that we paid that money, and it's not just about the money, but in my opinion, when we signed her up, we made a commitment, and we're going to stick with that commitment. When you decided to be a follower of Christ, you made a commitment. Are you sticking with that commitment? Well, this has happened and that's happened, and I've been hurt by the church, and I've been hurt by other people. I'm not asking you if you're committed to other people. I'm not asking if you're committed to Christian Church at Rome. I'm asking you if you're committed to Christ, because that's who you made the commitment to. And if you made the commitment to Him, if you made the commitment to be a follower of His, then you're going to realize that people are sometimes stupid. And they do stupid things. Because guess what? Sometimes you're stupid and you do stupid things. And yes, you're going to get hurt. And yes, you're going to get challenged. And yes, you're going to get angry. And yes, things are going to happen. But are you going to stick with it? Because you made a commitment. You find out what matters. You find out what matters and you devote yourself to doing these things. Man, we put too much time and effort into stuff that doesn't matter. Oh, my goodness. I was talking to Carrie just before the service started. Like I said, today's Sydney's birthday. We're going to have a birthday party for her today at 3 over here in the fellowship hall. I spent about $70 on cardboard and plastic the other day to hang decorations around the fellowship hall. That's so stupid. Now, I love my child, and I want her to have a great birthday party, and I want her to enjoy it. But, man alive, and the stress that I've put myself through thinking about, okay, are we going to get the right thing? Are we going to get it done in time? And is all this stuff going to happen? And I get all tied up in knots. And guess what? She's 7, and she really doesn't care if the streamer is here or here, or what the color scheme is. Kristen and I stood in Walmart yesterday. Yes, we are planners. We stood in Walmart yesterday and had about a 3-minute conversation on whether we needed to get this food coloring or this food coloring so that the icing on the cupcakes will match the decorations. That is 3 minutes of our lives we will never get back. We get so tied up in knots over stuff that doesn't matter, and yet there's the things that do matter, and we act very flippant about it, like it's not that big a deal. We'll have a 3-minute conversation about food coloring, but when's the last time we had a 3-minute conversation about whether or not our neighbor across the street's going to hell or not? We spend a lot of time on stuff that's really, really not worth our time and our effort. We have to stick it out. We have to understand that this commitment that we've made is worth talking about, and it's worth living for, and it's worth working towards. And no matter how tough it gets, we're not going anywhere. And we're not doing anything. Listen, I tell you this not so anybody will pat me on the back or give me any kind of accolades, but just a few weeks ago, like 2 weeks ago, was my 22nd anniversary here at the church. In 22 years, I've wanted to quit at least 400,000 times. And you have probably wanted me to quit at least 800,000 times. But there is a reason. There is a reason I still stand before you here this morning. There is a reason you're sitting where you're sitting. There is a reason for it. And we have to understand what that reason is and what that purpose is, and then we have to do something about it. But it's hard when we get into the difficulty of this life, and that leads us to the next thing, and we've got to refuse to get bogged down. We've got to refuse to get bogged down in life. We were talking about this in sermon prep the other day, and Rand, who's at the East Point campus, like, he's from up north. He's he just doesn't really understand Southern lingo sometimes, even though he's lived down here for a long time. And he looked at me and George and was like, "What does bogged down mean?" And George described it like this. He goes, "Have you ever been in the mud?" And Rand is a pretty put together kind of guy. And I'm thinking, no, probably not. But George said, have you ever been in such thick mud that you put your foot down in it and your foot sunk down in it so far that you thought that when you pulled your foot back up, your boot was probably going to stay in the mud? And then he proceeded to tell Rand this story that I love. George has a friend in South Georgia named Billy, actually, and I think I've talked to you a few times about Billy and George's relationship. But one time Billy called George, and he's got old Southern, almost Cajun sounding accent. He called him Judge Dillard. He said, "Judge Dillard, I got a gator in my pond." George goes, "Okay." He goes, "You're going to have to come help me get it because that gator's eating my chickens." So George goes over to their property, and they get on the old four-wheeler, and they ride way out and then back to the back country where his big old pond is. And down in South Georgia, they call them ponds. Up here, we would call them lakes. They're really, really big. Like, I think of a pond as something the size of this room or smaller. They think a pond is like Lake Weiss. I guess because they live close to the ocean. I don't know. But anyway, so he has this big old pond. And they get out on a boat, and they go looking for this gator. And finally, they see this gator peer up out of the water. And Billy's got a .30-06 rifle, and he points it at it, and he shoots. And then George said, "I know Billy's a good shot," so I had confidence that he hit him. But he shot at the gator, and the gator just sunk down. And then there was nothing. And Billy said, "Well, Judge Dillard, we got to get that gator." George was like, "Who?" He's like, "We? You got a mouse in your pocket? I don't know what you're talking about." So he said, next thing he knows, they're both in this water up to their chins, feeling around for a dead alligator. And he said they're feeling around, and all of a sudden Billy looks and goes, "I got him." And George goes, "Oh, he said, I'm praying that God, please let this alligator be dead." And so George said he went over to help Billy, and he grabs this alligator's tail to help get him up out of the water. And he said when he starts lifting, he said he felt his feet just sinking down into the bottom of the pond. And then the alligator ate him. No, I'm just kidding. The alligator was dead. Billy was a good shot. He got the gator. But his boots he said, as he tried to lift up, his boots just sunk down, and he said he could feel them. And he said he loved those boots, so he made sure he got them out. But that was the story he was talking about getting bogged down. We get bogged down in life. It's hard not to feel like you're stuck sometimes. We don't need to get to this place where we just can't move anymore. Don't lose sight. I love in Bill, when he was reading the passage, he even kind of stopped at this point, like this is the cool part that you need to understand, and it was that we don't need to lose sight that there will be justice. That God will take care of that. That's not really our job. We're not the God police. We're not to go around telling everybody what they're doing and what they're not doing and all that sort of thing. We need to just be who God has called us to be. Don't worry about keeping score. See, Jesus has already taken care of that, and he will take care of that. Why are you keeping up with other people's sins? I guarantee you, if you really started calculating it, you could barely keep up with your own. Don't get so trapped and distracted by what other people are doing. We talked about it in Sunday school this morning. How many of you ever heard from your parents or some other adult in your life, "Hey, if Ray jumped off a bridge, would you jump with him?" I actually had a friend that we called Ray Ray. I don't know if anybody, I wasn't just making that up. You know, if he leaves you where you are, that's where you're supposed to be right then. And if he moves you out of that into something else, that's where you're supposed to be right then. Don't sit around telling God where you're supposed to be and where you're supposed to be at and what you're supposed to be doing. You need to trust that God is putting you where you need to be, and that the things that are happening are the things that need to be happening. Because even if the things are bad, there are things that are going to make you stronger and better. And if the things are good, it's not because you're so great. It's because you are being blessed beyond measure by a God who loves and cares for you more than you could ever even comprehend. Don't get so wrapped up in what other people are doing. Pay attention to what's going on. And then finally, we need to have an absolute reliance on God. Absolute. The word absolute is so important here, because we can't rely on God and then not rely on God, and then rely on God and not rely on God. He will equip us for our calling. Whatever he has called you to, he will equip you to do it. Why in the world would he give you a job and then not give you the tools to do that job? That would be utterly ridiculous. And God is not utterly ridiculous. We can be, but he never is. And here's the thing. We get to a point in life so often where we just feel empty. And then we try to figure out what it's going to take to fill us back up. Oh, I need to put this in my life, and this in my life, and this in my life to make me feel like something's real and something's whole. And listen, you can't fill yourself up. That's God. That's what God does. He fills you up. He will put in there what needs to be there. And he gives us the strength when ours falters. Now, I don't know how many times I've been in the moment where I had something I had to do that I didn't know how I was going to do it. And I just have to throw myself on the mercy of the Lord, and he has never, ever let me down. Verses 11 and 12, he will fill your good ideas and acts of faith with his energy so that it will amount to something. I love that. Your good ideas and your acts of faith, but it's his energy. Because without that, without him, it doesn't amount to much. If your life honors Jesus, then Jesus will honor you. What people do with the gospel is their responsibility. What you do with the gospel is your responsibility. Refusal to do what's right and good, refusal to live in faith, refusal to desire what is good because you're worried what other people might think or what other people's reaction will be to that is just utter foolishness. So what do you need to do? You need to desire what is good. And the way that you figure that out is with his help. Are you ready to ask for that help today? Are you ready to understand what he's given you? Are you ready to desire what is good? Then let's get to it. Let's pray.